This meeting of the Tyler ISD Board of Trustees is called to order. We do have the presence of quorum. The meeting has been duly called and the notice of the meeting has been posted in the time and manner required. We'll jump right into public participation. Nobody's here. Okay. Golly.
I know.
Anybody? Continuous improvement student outcomes. We have a bilingual English as a second language annual evaluation. We do this yearly.
We do this annually, and Elizabeth Moore is going to come up to the podium along with Dr. Chief Academic Officer. Y'all know Ms. Moore here is our Director of Bilingual ESL, and this will be your annual exposure to all things in that realm.
Well, thank you for having me today, President Washman, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Crawford. It's a privilege to be here. So the last time I presented was a year ago, and it was my first presentation a year ago. So now I'm a Buller ISD resident, and it's my first year with the district this the month of September. So I'm excited.
All right.
Yeah. So let me go ahead and get started then. So first here in this first slide, what you're gonna see is a term for review, and basically the state has been updating our terminology in the past few months. So we've been seeing a change in terms. Emerging bilingual student, basically an emerging bilingual student it's a student whose primary language is another language other than English. And there's some previous use terminology there that I've included. We might see those previous use terms in like coding or just paperwork, but we're moving into emerging bilingual student. Just wanted to share that. Okay, and also just as a refresher, I wanted to touch quickly, show you at a glance our process for identifying emerging bilingual students. So we start with identification, and that begins in the enrollment process. We go into placement, and that's led by a committee that includes a parent. And then where we kind of live in my department is in the annual review. And basically, once a student is identified as an emerging bilingual student, we kind of oversee the student throughout the school year. We hold annual meetings beginning, middle, end. And then as we're reviewing throughout the school year, the last part is in those reviews, at the end of each school year, if a student has met exit criteria, then they go into number 4. And the state uses reclassification just as another term for their exiting the bilingual or ESL program. So getting into our numbers, for last school year, we served at snapshot 4,591 emerging bilingual students. We are growing towards the end of the school year. We were closer to 4,600, yes, and 40-something students. So that's where we were at the time. So we are growing, and last school year, I remember presenting and talking about different languages as well. So in 21-22, we served about emerging bilingual students about that had the primary language of about like 20 languages were in that category. 22-23, we were in like 30 or 31 languages that we were serving students in, predominantly Spanish. And then we had Vietnamese, Arabic, just to name a few. But so we are increasing in the primary languages that we're serving. You're seeing there also a table that includes the programs that we currently offer here in Tyler ISD and where these programs are being served as well. And shifting gears a little, so for our bilingual programs, you know, TEA, or the state requires that we have appropriately certified teachers to serve our emerging bilingual students. Now, the state also, they understand that with how things are currently in the teacher shortage, that's always not a possibility. So they allow us to submit what we call bilingual exceptions and ESL waivers whenever the teachers are not properly certified, and are working towards that. So I work really close in hand with HR to get all this process ongoing. And basically here, I'm showing you a comparison from where we were to 2 years ago and last year. And you probably noticed that increase in the ESL waivers for this past year. Part of that is we said we increase our expectations across the district and the required amount of teachers that needed to be ESL certified. As we're seeing our emerging bilingual numbers increase, then we're also saying, okay, maybe more teachers should be ESL certified too. More teachers need to understand how to properly serve our students. So that's where the increase in number. But 33 out of those 134 teachers were able to get certified. It is a percentage increase from 21-22. So from 5 out of the 33 was about 15%, and 33 out of the 134 is about 25%. So we are seeing progress. And also, I'm gonna go into the next slide. It kind of ties into this. Whenever we submit these requests to TEA, we also assure that we're gonna continue to support teachers throughout the school year, and that's part of that is through professional development. This year, we are partnering with Region 7 to continue to grow the professional development and what we can provide teachers as well. And let me give you an at a glance too for where we are with TELPAS. TELPAS is an assessment that the state uses to test students in their English proficiency. So they want to see where they are in acquiring the language. So they test the 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we are projecting a 44% growth for this school year. And so that's in comparison with the last year. So we are seeing growth throughout the we noticed growth last year, and we're continuing to see it at the beginning of this school year too, as we support the campuses. And with that note, so we had 93 students that were able to exit the program from 22-23 school year. So now those 93 students go into that number 4 category, and we continue to monitor them this year. So that's where we are. And then just to give you guys a quick glance of the test. So we just randomly selected 3rd grade in reading. We know 3rd grade is always a grade that we kind of point out with reading and where we are with things. So that's why we decided to choose this one. But a trend we wanted to show you was there were about 43 questions that were given to 3rd grade students in reading and writing. There was a combined test this year. And we see that we showed growth compared to the state. So we wanted you guys to see that. And that is a trend that we saw across the board. TELPAS is given K through 12. K1 is a holistic rating piece. 2nd through 12, they take it online. So that's another thing that changed this 22-23 school year with TELPAS is everything went online for grades 2nd through 12, where previously we still were maintaining writing as a paper base, and it was a holistic rating at the time. Right now, TA has graded everything for us. So when I showed you the percentage growth to it's a projection as well, because we are hoping that some of the scores that come back for some students can also increase that. We're still waiting for some ratings per se. Yeah, and then with the STAR redesign, I know we've talked about that a lot, but that also affected TELPAS, and it was redesigned last year. New item types were included, and good thing is they released the test this year, so we're able to analyze and look at things more closely. And changing gears a little, so this last summer my department offered summer school for students pre-K through 3rd grade. We had a total of 236 students that attended. So it was fast and furious. It was an all-day program. Transportation was provided. We partnered with Title I so we could do that. And it was very successful for us. And that is all I have for you guys today.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
I have a quick comment. One of the things I talk about, especially when I talk to our Latino community, is about how the demographics here and how they're changing to mirror some of our urban peers. And because of that, bilingual ed then becomes more and more important, especially when it comes to meeting some of our goals. Especially with early literacy. And And so a large, especially when you were showing some of those numbers in our elementary schools. So I think that in many ways, our success and failure is determined by how we do with this group. And so I just want to say thanks for all your hard work here, and I hope you feel supported by us, and we know that it takes a lot.
Thank you. I do love my team. Dr. Norman is amazing as supervisor, Dr. Gropel, so I'm learning a lot. And also, you know, it takes a lot to get to this place and be able to present to you all. So shout outs to HR that partners with me, Title I, Assessment and Accountability. I'm, you know, tied to the hip with Dr. Curitin with this data sometimes. And my team too, we're you know, every day I can assure you they give it their best. Thank you.
Okay, so of the, let's say the 4,600 right now, how much of those are usually, since there is kind of an exit typically, I guess, at some point, like you don't have to, I'm not gonna hold you to it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Elementary, you know, middle school and high school, are the bulk of them gonna be in elementary, or?
It's kind of sprinkled throughout. So the bulk right now in elementary is in the bilingual classes. And for the most part, you know, parents accept the services. So we're in the placement phase, we do ask parents, would you like to accept the services? For the most part, they accept. So they are in those classes for the bulk part. But we do have students like at Jack that they did not want the services, and now they fall into the category of ESL. They accept placement as, okay, we're still an emerging bilingual student, and we're just gonna learn the language through the content. And so it's an immersion, basically. So there, Birdwell has a bulk of the students too there as well, and they're K-8, so that's, you know, they have a great number there too. Tyler High School has the bulk for high school. They're between 700 and 800 students there. Moore Middle School too, they're between 400 and 500 students, so we kind of do have like pockets of where the students are.
And then, so 4,600 of our 18,000 students, that's a quarter?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's 1/4. And then the majority of them, I assume, are Hispanic.
Yes, and that is part of why the bilingual programs are focused with the Spanish language, is because the state requires, like, there's a number. So for example, if you have 20 students that speak Vietnamese and they're in the same grade level, then we have to attempt to offer a bilingual program in Vietnamese, but we're not there yet. So Vietnamese, I remember we had between 30 and 35 students last year that was their primary language, but it wasn't in the same grade level. So with that being said, Spanish has become, you know, it's the main one because that is our primary language.
So if nearly half of our students are Hispanic, you know, say 9,000 and then 4,600, I mean, that's so half of the Hispanic students are in this category. So, I mean, yeah, it is just, there's a lot of impact,
Yes, sir.
you know, that goes along with it. So
Yeah.
we definitely want to do our best there.
How many newcomers are there,
I was just looking at that.
percentage-wise, you think, out of that 4,600?
Let's say 10%,
Yeah.
10, 15%. It's increasing this year. Dr. Norman and I were just talking about it this morning. I think it goes back to our current state of the country and where we are with things, but we are increasing the numbers across the board. We know right now Tyler High has about 50 students just at Tyler High. So, yeah.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up, that's kind of where you always gauge the degree of difficulty in instructing these students that are classified as emerging bilingual. That's what we did in Dallas, Rojo. You know, you get to the point to where you had kids from Somalia, or you get kids from the Middle East or Asian, a lot of Chinese. And when you have the diversity within the languages, I think this is where you're going with it, it becomes extremely difficult to educate kids of English language needs. Typically, in Tyler, they've been born here. And so they have a little bit more of an advantage growing, even though their household may not be native English speakers. they do pick up some of that as they're growing up, and I think it's very beneficial for us. It's kind of a neat little mix we have here. It would be very difficult if we had 60% of those kids being newcomer kids, which you see in a lot of the urban areas as well. So it kind of shows in our STAR results. We've got pretty good performance when you start talking about the complexities of that. Now, if you look at the Valley, that's a pretty homogeneous instructional model down there. So you might want to ask, well, how are they just knocking it out of the park? Because there's a lot of A-rated school districts and et cetera. So when you have a large bulk of your kids that are, a quarter of your kids that are, taking these high-stakes tests, you kind of have to kind of know the stuff behind the scenes about what that all means. So we're doing fairly well. In fact, we've really increased over the last decade or so our performance on our end-of-year tests and everything. So I always go back to the newcomers and gauging how many we have there. And if it's 10%, that's probably 100% increase of what we used to have, because we used to only be 5%. But it's still only, a handful of those 4,600 kids. You're looking at maybe 450 kids are our newcomers out of that 4,600, I guess.
And I can double check my numbers. I can always come back and verify that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of our kids are born here is usually the point that I get at.
I just have a quick question. Dual language one way, dual language two way. And I feel like I know this, but I'm going
Oh,
to
here we go. We've talked about, you haven't.
I have? Oh.
No, we've talked about this before,
I
but
just
go ahead.
what it means, just so I can
Yes,
understand
no,
this.
that is a great question. So the dual is basically the one way and the two way. Let me go straight to the answer is the student. So that is referring to the student. So in a dual language, one way, the students participating, they're only emergent bilingual students. In the two way, it's emergent bilingual students and non-emergent bilingual students, which is what Birdwell has. Yes.
Okay.
So the one and the two is based on the student participation.
Okay, gotcha.
Hey, can you pull up that slide, Mr. Bogue, of, keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going. The list of schools, there you go. So I guess the way to look at this is their methodology on that campus, with the principal pretty much has a lot of discretion on, with heavy influence from us as well.
Yes, sir.
And then how they perform on those end of year, ultimately in those EOCs, not EOCs, but STAR tests, and whether or not the effectiveness is really helping there inside of that bilingual population. And you can look at the list of those campuses. While we struggle in some areas performance-wise with ratings, if you look at the bilingual students on those campuses, they're performing pretty well, for lack of a better term. That's anecdotal. It's not really some hard data behind you. We can look at that later on, but that's kind of whether or not you determine whether or not that type of instruction is, whether it's one way or two way or it's early exit, if that's effective or not.
Yes, and the difference between the early exit and the dual is the amount of language that's used in the primary language. So the duals, there's 50-50. We can say there's 90-10. Birdwell right now is using 90-10. So basically, pre-K, they start with 90% in Spanish, and then they kind of increase the percentages to when the upper grades, it becomes 50-50. And then so you kind of choose what content you kind of filter that through. For example, they're using social studies and science to do more of the Spanish through content as well. The early exit is less of the primary language and more strict. So that is the difference between the programs.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen a lot of boards, including this one, get up here and debate, not with you on it, debate about what's best. And subject matter experts, we rely upon them heavily to guide us on what those recommendations are, and the principal at that campus. We've also had parent input in regard to that as well. I mean, I'm talking about over the last 20 years. In fact, we ran into a former director of bilingual here at TASA TASB, and knowing some of the history here in Tyler in regard to that, it's interesting how shifts have occurred there. And it's really about meeting the needs of those students, parental empowerment, there's a term for you. And then making sure that the principals have a lot of discretion on how they want that conducted, because their necks are on the line every day for performance. So that's kind of a little commentary about the debates about early exit versus one-way versus two-way.
If I could just add, so I'm an emerging bilingual student. I came to the country when I was in 6th grade. So I'm not going to tell you my age, but that's when I came to the state. I did not speak English.
10 years ago.
California, 10 years ago.
There you go.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. California, they did not have a bilingual program that I remember. So I was immersed. So I was per se in the ESL program, like full on, let's do it. So my belief personally, I've experienced different programs. I was a bilingual transitional late exit teacher starting in my career. I've been an assistant principal at a dual language two-way campus. So I just believe that if implemented with fidelity, anything can be successful. So in our programs, that's what we're looking at internally. Are we implementing this with fidelity? And then what else, what are the outliers? Like, for example, the newcomers, how do we do that extra layer of support for that? And how do we bring in the parents, because they do have a big part in supporting our program as well.
Very good. I'll say this about HR's tie into this, because we can't do this without effective teachers. Being able to recruit and retain and be innovative and creative. Ron Jones, chief of staff, all the way down to Letty, finding those individuals for us in a very difficult period of education to find qualified and quality teachers. Quality especially. Our HR department's doing a pretty good job, and that's after cutting off the pipeline to Spain, which we used to make a living doing prior to COVID. We would have a lot of Spaniards from Europe coming here to provide instruction. I say that because that's kind of what they say in West Texas still, right, Aaron? Spanish. Anyways, in saying that, we were pretty good shape, bilingual certified teacher, or those that maybe come over from the Philippines. We have a large contingent of Filipino teachers that actually speak Spanish here, which is interesting as well. Saw 2 of them get baptized at Green Acres the other day. It made me proud. I got to stand up because they ask you to stand up when your coworkers are getting baptized. Anyways, I digress. It's pretty cool that we have this diversity from either South America, Central America, or Mexico, some from Europe, some from the Philippines as well. And I understand that they're starting to possibly open up the European option again as well. So, and not just virtual, because in-person interviews are so much more enjoyable for Letty. So anyways, that's just kind of a background about how we're getting here, because you may be wondering how we're finding bilingual teachers to serve these kiddos.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, you look at the exception and the waivers. I mean, that's a large jump. I mean, from 33 to 134.
Yeah, it goes back to the expectation of before we might have not been including the categories that we are now. So we are considering like elective teachers should be part of that. So we are considering, so that is part of like the expectation of like, we're in this together, we're one. So that's part. Some of the teachers are in under DOIs as well, so they have to get that part first before they do the ESL piece. So there's a different components. If the 33 looks a little low too, some teachers are trying to take the test, and the test is not that easy either. So they've had a try here and there for the test. So I know they're trying, they're working towards that, and then other requirements as well that.
Yeah, so you might be saying that a teacher that teaches AJ, my 8th grader, may have ESL needy kids in there. That's who we're talking about on those. It's not bilingual certified, which is a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
On trying to find quality individuals. This is about getting someone like Mr. Leverett or myself certified in ESL to be able to serve those kids. That's why that number's there. So we've just kind of broadened that. I know that's kind of like, oh my gosh, we're not talking about 134 teachers that need bilingual certification.
Gotcha.
That's taken care of differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is scary. I was scary to move forward with even the decision, but I felt like, you know, district-wide, it was the best decision to make. They have to take the test, but before they take that ESL certification test, they also have to be certified in the content that they're teaching. So a lot of the teachers in that category, they're working on that piece. And I think that has also brought an increase due to the teacher shortage. And, you know, where some teachers might be going through an alternative program, so they're not fully certified yet. So that comes before they can even be approved to take that ESL. So then they fall under that.
And that's where the convergence of state exceptions or allowable things like DOI kind of butt up against federal requirements in a lot of ways as well. I remember 25, what is this, 2023? Yeah, 25 years ago, I remember them wanting me to get my ESL certification because we had a lot of Middle Eastern kids at Euless Trinity High School. We had kids from Tonga, which good luck on that, right? But that's a different type of mindset, and it's a struggle that the state's been going through for longer than I've been an educator.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? We really appreciate you, and just keep up the good work.
Thank you.
It's important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God is good. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, we
Thank
have
you
a
all.
class size update.
Yeah, part of your board monitoring calendar and actually part of our district of innovation. This is one thing that used to be sent down to the state, but because of DOI, we actually have opportunities now just to handle this at the local level. One of the great things about that the state of Texas legislature has done about getting some empowerment, some conversations at the local level instead of having to send it to the commissioner for approval. So you have at the table today, Deputy Superintendent of Administration, Dr. Lance Gropel. It looks like Tasha Bjork, our CFO, our Deputy Superintendent of Finance and Operations, has now handed the baton to Dr. Gropel for him to provide the actual report from here on out.
From here on out. She let
Okay.
me know when she walked off the stage from presenting this last year that this was going to be my opportunity to present moving forward. So I appreciate that opportunity, Tasha. As Dr. Crawford said, the state requires in kindergarten through fourth grade that we maintain a 22-to-1 ratio. As a part of our district of improvement plan, our DOI plan, we no longer have to submit those waivers, but we make the attempt to keep those ratios the same. Areas where we cannot keep that ratio the same, we provide additional assistance in the form of a paraprofessional. You have a chart in front of you there that lists out each campus where we have, and grade level where we have an additional para there. They have some shaded spots where working with the principal, they made the determination was made ultimately that the para would not benefit the students, and we could continue to provide an excellent experience for the kids in those classrooms. So that's what you see with the shaded ones there. Everywhere else where you don't see a shade, we are working or already have in place paraprofessionals in those classrooms. So I'm not going to read the numbers to you. You guys can read through those. If you have any questions, I'll be willing to take any questions.
Well, as y'all are looking at that, I'll just provide a little bit of additional commentary. I believe a decade ago, we were walking in here and we had twice the numbers on here. So we've been able to kind of maintain a reduction there of about, I don't know, anywhere from 70% to half of what it used to be.
Yeah.
But again, we always point out the fact that it's a handful of kids per grade level, as opposed to this perception that it's everywhere.
Right.
That tips us over this as well. For instance, in second grade, district-wide amongst our bilingual classrooms, there's only 4 kids that cause us to actually have these things that happen, and it's only just a handful of kids in those grades.
Right, and we as a district make some difficult decisions to shuffle some personnel around from campus to campus. We may have lower numbers and higher numbers, so we've moved some teachers from campus to campus this year to help support and offset some of that as well, which is not necessarily the most popular thing, but it's doing what's in the best interest of the kids.
Yeah, when we hear one of the things in consideration there is y'all may hear this, is like, say it's a kindergarten teacher and you go to meet the teacher night and it's the kindergarten teacher, that first time teacher, the first experience. Well, let's just say at campus A, you're very light over there. Let's say you only have 10 kids per class over there because they just show up like we projected them to, and yet we have 3 teachers over there. When we could actually utilize 2, when you say, well, oh my gosh, we're going to go and take the 1 teacher and move them over to campus B because you've got 27 kids per class in kindergarten over there. Well, then you kind of break the heart of the one campus and the one set of students to satisfy some of the requirements that we have here. So we pay attention to that. Can't always just keep the teacher there to satisfy those needs. And the other thing is, tell us where a good kindergarten teacher is available in September of a school year. That's so, the law and the way that these things happen and having to satisfy some of the board needs, it's difficult. I mean, UT Tyler doesn't have a trunkload of teachers over there that say, hey, we've got a kindergarten teacher for you that has already been plucked up by, another school system. So there's a lot of juggling that has to go on when you start doing these things.
Okay. Well, I think it was August. I might have missed that meeting, but I feel like there might have been a conversation about class size versus teacher aid versus quality of teacher. So we're not going to go over that again. Thank you for your,
We discuss that fairly frequently here.
yes.
Yeah.
Can you just speak to Jack a little bit with their high number? And it seems like Jack usually has maybe higher numbers than everybody else. And I just want to make sure we're not taking advantage of them because they are traditionally fairly high performing.
Yes, sir. So the high numbers at Jack, we had an influx of students there this year, different from what we had in past years, specifically thinking about last year. Kids are matriculating from first grade to second grade to third grade. So their second, third, and fourth are higher. We actually moved a teacher from another campus to Jack to help offset some of that. As well as working with Mr. Shelby with his fifth grade team, keeping the numbers lower on his fifth grade team to help bolster continue to bolster their high quality performance there. We have deployed 2 paraprofessionals there for the fifth grade, and again, to Dr. Crawford's point, the feeling amongst the campus was keeping the numbers in, I believe it's second grade, a little bit higher for not having to change teachers and shuffle kids around 6 weeks into school.
We tightly budget fairly well. We're pretty successful on that. That's one reason that you have this as well. So with the way South Tyler's kind of growing, as we all know, you have a little bit of the private overspill back into some of our public schools, something we're aware of, and sometimes we hit accurately, and sometimes it's a handful of kids in second grade. Now, remember those 5 students at Jack are not in one class.
Correct.
It's spread out amongst how many teachers? Do you know how many teachers they have at Jack?
5.
In that grade level?
Yeah.
So
It's all 5 classes are over is what that.
all
number
5
is.
classes over by 1, right?
I
Probably.
believe 1 or 2.
Yeah,
1 or 2.
so-
So it's not a significant number
Yeah.
of overage there. There's a bigger overage in the 4th grade, which is why we have more pairs in that 4th grade. We have 2 pairs in that 4th grade than we do in that
So
second.
let's compare them to like maybe an Andy Woods that has some pretty robust class sizes as well. How many of those are all monolingual classes, they're the monolinguals. How many of our classrooms would you say, Tasha, you can chime in as well? We won't ask you any questions. I'm just going to ask you to chime in. We'll make sure all questions are directed towards Dr. Gropel. But I'm going to ask you for input on this. How many of our classes are in the monolinguals district-wide, this might help as well, have 6 teachers in a grade level? Because that's what you'd be asking for here in this grade, is to have 6 teachers in that grade level. Okay,
Every grade level but fifth grade at Woods.
okay,
Has six, and their fifth grade does not at Woods either. So fourth and fifth grade there.
right. And so, but at Jack, if you were to have six, I mean, how many teachers at Jack do you have? I mean, how many grade levels? Okay. It shrunk and it kind of builds back, okay.
Yeah, he's got six teachers in fifth grade at Jack, and all the rest of his grades have five.
Yeah,
That's why that sixth, or the fifth grade could have gone down to cure the fourth grade, but we chose to keep it there to keep lower class.
okay, so principal choice.
Principal choice on that
And the
part.
last thing I'll just kind of give the board as we contend the game is the transfer game. Sometimes we have heavy transfer requests from one school A to school B, and sometimes we don't, that causes this to kind of either be low, or then sometimes we're so full we can't accept any more transfers, or we actually accepted transfers back in the spring, and then we wind up getting
Move-ins.
either move-ins, or maybe they're choosing public school instead of going private. So there's some anecdotal stuff that are behind these numbers that, cause some of these little bubbles to percolate every now and then.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, thank you. We will now go into executive session, and I do not think there's any action to follow. Is there, Marty?
I do not have any.
Okay. Okay, well, we will now go into executive session.